Hi, welcome to the Times of Israel's daily briefing. It is Thursday, December 11th, and I'm Jessica Steinberg. I'm speaking today with U.S. reporter Luke Tress. Luke, how are you?
Hey, good, Jessica. Good to see you.
Good. It's good to have you on the daily briefing. It's been a little bit of a while. It is day 797 of the war. In our headlines right at the moment, there's news that the U.S. plans to formally announce the Board of Peace, an international board tasked with overseeing the management of Gaza. It will be headed by U.S. President Donald Trump. In other news, Iceland joined Spain, Ireland, Slovenia, and the Netherlands in quitting next year's Eurovision contest in protest of Israel's participation. We will look at some of the news in the U.S., how Jewish students were singled out and scapegoated, as was found from Columbia University's last final antisemitism report. Luke will also tell us about some discrimination case at UC Berkeley and at Cal State, both in different stages. And the latest on Mayor-elect Zoran Mamdani and what is being discussed in the Jewish community about him. So stay with us.
Over 2,000 years ago, the Hanukkah flame burned against all odds, a symbol of resilience and hope that still shines brightly today. Now, Israel once again turns to light, not just to remember, but to protect and rebuild. As the country rises from 2 years of war, the Technion's brightest minds are leading the way, revitalizing the economy, strengthening national security, and shaping a future full of promise. This Hanukkah, we honor the Technion minds who bring light to the darkness, in our labs, on our front lines, and in our hearts. May the light of innovation illuminate every corner of Israel, heralding a new era of strength and renewal.
Luke, your piece about Columbia University's anti-Semitism task force is at the top of the page right now as we're recording this. The task force released its fourth and final report on Tuesday, and the main findings are that Jewish and Israeli students were singled out and scapegoated in classrooms. And you also noted that the university lacked faculty in Middle East studies who were not anti-Zionist. You, of course, have been looking at this from the start of this situation. Tell me what you really were noting as you were looking through this report. I imagine, I'm pretty sure you've looked at all of them at this point.
Yeah, it's the task force. It's this group of faculty at Columbia that the university set up after all this turmoil at the start of the war. So they were this investigative group of faculty making these reports independent of the administration. It was part of their response to charges of anti-Semitism. So they put out 4 reports. Other ones focused on protests and the climate on campus. So this one focused on what was happening in the classroom. And a lot of it is about how teachers and faculty were addressing Israel issues in a way that often discriminated against Jews and Israelis. So there are a lot of incidents described in the report, which was based on interviews with students. In some of the incidents, an Israeli professor's class was disrupted on the first day of the semester, which was something we reported at the time.
Yeah, I remember that.
This really kind of shocking disruption of the class. It was a class by an Israeli about Israeli history. It was kind of like a class that was meant to portray Zionism in a not anti-Zionist light, like a lot of the classes are. In some other incidents, an Israeli was accused of settler colonialism, which is this far-left academic framework that's used to denigrate Israel. An IDF veteran was called a murderer in front of the rest of her class. One instructor said Jewish donors to Columbia were, quote, laundering blood money by making donations. Some of the instructors were facilitating the protests against Israel by canceling classes so students could go. and some of them held classes in the protests, which is significant because Zionists were not welcome in the protests. So it was kind of keeping Israelis and Zionist Jews out of the
If they were in
classroom.
those classes, they would not have been able to attend, obviously.
Yeah, or they wouldn't be comfortable
Right.
attending.
In that situation. Yeah.
Yeah, which is discriminatory, as the report notes. And then another big finding in this report is that the Middle East Studies department at Columbia has almost no instructors that are not explicitly anti-Zionist. So it says that Zionist Jewish and Israeli students who wanted to study the Middle East at Columbia weren't really able to do so because they couldn't even attend classes that weren't anti-Zionist. So it's calling for like, there's a lot of recommendations, but one of them is that they need to diversify the ideology in these departments. And the last big theme of this report is this balance between free speech and academic freedom, which is a very tricky balance. Like, part of the report says, for example, you have professors who are talking about Israel in these harsh terms when it's not part of their academic expertise. And it's kind of saying, like, we don't want to hamper free speech or tell professors what to do, but like some of this statements really cross the line. Not just in this case, it's kind of a broader tension over this issue. Like, we want professors to be able to say whatever they want, but it's hard to deal with that when what they're saying is perceived by Jews as discriminatory.
Luke, what's supposed to happen after the release of this final report? What do you know about that?
So Columbia has settled with the Trump administration. There's $200 something million fine. They didn't. The president put out a statement. She welcomed the report and thanked the task force, but she didn't commit explicitly to any of its recommendations. So we'll have to see where it goes from here. And I mean, one thing is that people want something done about some of these faculty that have facilitated a lot of these protests, but it hasn't happened except in one or two cases. We'll have to see what happens at Columbia after this.
Okay, now juxtapose that to some reporting you've been doing about University of California, Berkeley, and about Cal State. Two different and yet, related kinds of issues of discrimination against an Israeli academic at Berkeley, and having to do with opposing a state anti-Semitism bill regarding a professor at UC Davis. So take us through that in whichever order it makes sense for you and the way you've been reporting on it.
Yeah, I'll start with Cal State because it's similar to Columbia in that this is an instance that gave us a window into the classroom and how Israel issues are being handled in the classroom. So this was at California State University in Los Angeles. This prominent academic there, her name's Melina Abdullah. She's like a prominent activist in ethnic studies and the Black Lives Matter movement. She live streamed a class in September on her personal YouTube page, but nobody picked up on it until we reported it a couple of days ago. And during this class, she's coaching her students to oppose a state bill that was meant to target anti-Semitism. And so we don't see what's happening in these classrooms a lot of the time. We hear reports, but we don't get to sit down and watch it. So we had a chance here to watch this whole class. And she's explicitly telling her students this anti-Semitism bill is it's a racist bill. It's an attack on Muslims, and she's telling them to sign this petition to oppose this bill that was meant to combat anti-Semitism in K through 12 schools. It was really political advocacy. She wasn't educating about both sides. She was kind of coaching her students to take this position, which is not allowed in public California universities.
What class was this? What class was she teaching?
It was a class called Racism, Activism, and Emotion.
And how did you come across the video? Meaning you said it hadn't been it hadn't been something that was widespread in terms of being seen. So how did you come upon it?
Yeah, there's a group called the Amcha Initiative. It's an advocacy group that opposes anti-Semitism on college campuses. So they like being in New York. I don't follow what's happening in California as closely, but they are following this, and they've been following this professor. So they picked up on this video and shared it with me a few days ago.
Got it. All right. Now, what happened? And at Berkeley, it was there was a legal settlement over related kind of case, right?
Yeah, so this is at UC Berkeley. So it's also a public California college like Cal State. So Berkeley had an Israeli visiting professor there named Yael Nativ. She's a sociologist and dance instructor, and she taught there before October 7th, and they told her they wanted her back to come back again, and then they rescinded it, told her not to, didn't invite her back after, because of the protests on campus.
And meaning after October 7th and the protests.
Yeah, someone in the department told her it's too hot right now and the grad students are angry, referring to the protests, and he said, therefore, we can't have you back. So she sued the school. Like, there was an internal process, and then she sued the school, and they settled this week. And this case was interesting because it's not actually about anti-Semitism. Like, most of these college legal cases are about anti-Semitism against American Jewish students, but in this
Right.
case, it's about being Israeli. Like, anti-Semitism wasn't an issue.
Meaning, right, her nationality as an Israeli.
Yeah. So it's a little different than most of these cases because under U.S. law, you can't discriminate based on religion, and a few other categories, and also national origin. So this was kind of a more pure national origin case, and not about discrimination against Jews for their religion. They settled the case. The two sides settled. And so yeah, she like effectively won. They apologize. Yeah, they apologized to the chancellor, apologized to her. They paid her damages, and they are going to invite her back to teach again.
But they don't have. Do we know when that has to happen by? Is there a date?
There was
a
a date in this settlement in the next year. I think they gave her a few options for when she can return, and she can choose.
Interesting. And the question is, will she? Okay. All right. Let's take a break from anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism on the campus, and when we're back, we'll talk about mayoral-elect Zoran Mamdani and really what's been going around in the Jewish community ahead of his actually taking office. So stay with us.
3 million Israelis are dealing with trauma since October 7th. To help Israelis heal, Hadassah is there, with the largest rehabilitation center in Jerusalem, world-renowned medical centers, and youth villages. It's said, saving a life saves the world. Imagine helping millions. This is Hadassah, a life-changing force in Israel and the world.
Okay, so Luke, I feel like I look at the articles you've written of late, and many of them are about Mamdani or the Mamdani effect that we don't even really know what it is yet. And it's sort of like this spin around it. So tell us from your perspective, really, where, now it's December 10th. We're weeks away from him taking office. How are you, in a sense, how has your reporting changed, or what is the reporting about Mamdani? What is it about at this moment?
Yeah, so Mamdani hasn't made a lot of news himself on Israel issues in the last couple of weeks since his statement about the Park East synagogue protest, which we talked about on the podcast before. He condemned both the protesters who were holding this really caustic protest at the synagogue, and he also condemned the synagogue. So that outraged a lot of people. Since then, he hasn't really done anything himself related to Israel, but there's been all this movement around him, like both statements coming out and these like reckoning in the Jewish community and political moves. So the most recent one today is Brad Lander, the New York City comptroller, said he will run for Congress. And Lander he's pretty far left. He's
Right.
Jewish, but he's not so far left that he's anti-Zionist. So he's kind of like on the far left of the Zionist movement or like Zionist positions. And he's challenging Dan Goldman, who's also Jewish, for the 10th congressional district. So Goldman's also a Democrat. He's also liberal. Like the two of them aren't that far
I
apart
was
on
gonna say,
most
like, how different
issues.
are they actually?
Yeah, they're not that different. Like they're both very against Trump. They're both like against Trump administration's crackdown on immigrants. The big division is in their approach to Israel. And like even Goldman, he's criticized Netanyahu and the war in Gaza. So he's not like really extremely pro-Israel or something like this. He's kind of just centrist Jewish Democrat pro-Israel, but Lander's to the left, and he's also stands out because of his partnership with Mamdani. Like they allied with each other during the mayoral campaign, and Mamdani endorsed Lander for his congressional run. And this is kind of part of the bigger move of progressives in the city who are challenging more centrist Democrats after Mamdani's win. They're kind of riding on the coattails behind Mamdani. A lot of them are talking about Israel and criticizing Israel in their campaigns because Mamdani kind of broke this mold that you should be pro-Israel and in line with mainstream Jewish communities to
In the
run
New
for
York
New York
area.
City. Yeah, so we have all these candidates now. Like also in the race for Jerry Nadler's seat in the 12th congressional district, he's retiring. So yeah, a lot of these progressives are kind of following in Mamdani's wake now and trying to win elections with also with criticism of Israel as part of their campaigns.
And Landers, do you see that? I mean, obviously, he is also heading in that direction, but do you see a difference from where he is now to where he was before he announced his run for the seat on the Israel front?
Since he announced his run for mayor, he's moved a little closer to Mamdani's positions, but that's like also probably because the war had progressed since then.
Right.
Like at first he had kind of hesitated to accuse Israel of genocide, and now he does, or he has. He said things like Israel is doing ethnic cleansing and forced starvation of Palestinians. So his rhetoric has moved a little further to the left in the last year or so.
Okay, so then taking the Mamdani piece a little bit further, what else are you seeing within the broader Jewish community or within reactions to the Jewish community? What are people thinking, saying, feeling about Mamdani ahead of his actually taking office?
Yeah, there's still kind of this like a reckoning and trying to come to terms and what to do about Mamdani before he takes office. So like last week I was at a protest at the Park East synagogue, the synagogue that was targeted in the anti-Israel protests.
Right.
So there was more than 1,000 Jewish community members there in support of the synagogue. People didn't talk about Mamdani specifically, but that was kind of the subtext for a lot of it. This show of solidarity and support. Also, Mark Levine, who's replacing Lander as city comptroller, spoke there. So there's so like that's another thing. So even though Mamdani's taking office, we have Mark Levine coming in as comptroller, which is a very powerful position.
Right.
Last week, Julie Menin, who's also a centrist Jewish legislator, she said she's essentially the presumed next city council speaker, which is another powerful position. And then we have Jessica Tisch, who's also centrist and Jewish, who's the NYPD commissioner. So we even though Mamdani's coming in, there are some moderating forces from the Jewish community in the city government.
And then what are other leaders saying about Mamdani? In other words, again, reacting even though he's not doing the job yet.
Yeah, so like for example, on Monday I was at the National Assembly for the American Zionist Movement, this kind of umbrella group. First of all, President Herzog was there. He was speaking about Mamdani. He also talked about Mamdani at a Yeshiva University gala this week, and he's saying kind of like Mamdani. He said Mamdani makes no effort to conceal his contempt for the Jewish state of Israel. He's kind of framing it as this broader increase in anti-Semitism, and then also at the American Zionist Movement Assembly, Rabbi Elliot Cosgrove was a featured speaker. So he's a conservative rabbi at Park Avenue Synagogue. Like he's one of the more prominent rabbis in the city. And he was really critical of Mamdani during the campaign. Like he kind of took a risk by getting into politics and warning about Mamdani. But on Monday he was talking about like he said Mamdani understood the fissures in the Jewish community better than we did. Like he understood that there's all this antagonism toward Israel in the Jewish community. Like some
Among
polls said
Jews. Yeah.
among
Mhm.
Jews, some polls said something like a third of Jews voted for Mamdani. And he said, like, yeah, we need to. He called for, quote, a new chapter of American Zionism. He says we need to make our tent bigger. We need to not fight as much in the Jewish community for those who are not anti-Zionist. He said we should call our opponents not either self-hating Jews or colonialist oppressors. So he's kind of saying like we need to make the tent bigger and hold the line, like use that to hold the line better against the like our real enemies who are not in the tent of the Jewish community. So
kind of shifting his position for the moment.
I don't know. Like, I don't know if it's shifting his position. Like, I don't think he said it the opposite of this before, but he's kind of calling, he's kind of saying like Mamdani read us better than we did. And we need, like, here's what we need to do, which is to make our movement more expansive and tolerant of other political views within the Jewish community.
Okay. Interesting. Luke, anything else you want to tell us about Mamdani or anyone else on the New York front?
I mean, a couple other things. Like we both have the Governor Kathy Hochul and Mayor Eric Adams kind of making some distance or putting up roadblocks for Mamdani before he comes into office. So we had Hochul last week saying like opening some distance between her and Mamdani over Israel. Like Hochul endorsed Mamdani in the campaign, but then she said last week she spoke out against boycotts of Israel, which is something Mamdani is a fan of. She criticized his statement about Park East, and she said Mamdani does not have the power to arrest Prime Minister Netanyahu, which is something Mamdani keeps promising he'll do, but he can't actually do. So we saw Hochul kind of distancing herself from some of Mamdani's positions.
Okay.
And then
And Adams?
So Adams, who's very pro-Israel, like about as pro-Israel as you can be, he issued some executive orders last week. One was against like prohibiting government officials who deal with contracts from discriminating against Israel. So it's essentially an anti-BDS executive order. And he also ordered the police to evaluate proposals for limiting protests at synagogues in response to the Park East protests. So these are kind of like landmines that Mamdani will have to deal
Right,
with
exactly.
when he comes
Throwing them
into
in his
office.
path before he has to actually deal with it.
Yeah, so he'll have to decide what to do with like this Israel divestment executive order or like other ones that Adams has issued. Like he endorsed the IRA definition of anti-Semitism for city government a few months ago, which says some forms of Israel criticism are anti-Semitic. So like Mamdani might be considered anti-Semitic in his own government if that order is still there. So he has that. Adams set up an anti-Semitism task force that Mamdani will have to deal with. So Adams is kind of like throwing up these roadblocks related to Israel and Jewish issues that Mamdani will have to decide what to do with once he comes into office.
Right, to keep them or to get rid of them. Okay. Interesting. Luke, thank you for the highlights and the heads ups on all of this. It's been a while. It's been good to have you on the Daily Briefing.
Yep, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
For sure. And thanks to you for listening to the Times of Israel's Daily Briefing. Stay tuned for tomorrow's installment. This episode was produced by the Padwaves. As always, any comments you might have, feel free to drop us an email at podcast@timesvisual.com. Until next time, take care and be well.